With my AI, artificial intelligence friends during what some of you call the Thanksgiving weekend, the big turkey eating fest over there in North America. And the reason for this video is, or the inspiration for this video is a lecture by Extinction Rebellion founder and one of the main persons of that activism organization in England, Dr. Roger Hallam. And he made a parallel or an example out of the game of Monopoly, comparing it to the runaway global warming, or the irreversible changes going on up in the Arctic, so that you come to a point and then both the Arctic and the Monopoly game will only go in one direction. He says that you get a maximum of 3 hours, and then there will only be one player left, or the game is over because one player won. And so I wanted to test that hypothesis, and also, of course, to play the game. But I wanted to try and meditate over the game with that in mind, with the self-reinforcing feedback loops in mind that he talks about. And I have to add that, of course, I really like playing board games, all kinds of board games, with real live human beings as well. But you know, for this purpose, for the purpose of this video, it was much easier to just threaten or force 3 digital friends to play with me. You know, Mr. Cannon and Mr. Battleship and Miss Wheelbarrow. So we give it a go. And you know, the start of the game is, you know, pretty boring and uneventful, even though it leads up to what happens later. So I'll just play a little audio from Hallam's lecture, and then we'll get back to commenting on the game and the self-reinforcing feedbacks after the clip.
Okay, so this is probably the main part of the talk, really. So, can you just hand these out? Most of the time you go to a talk about climate change, people talk about it within the frame of the Paris Agreement, which is like keeping things under 2 degrees centigrade, the heat increase. Everyone presumably knows about this. And they'll talk about carbon budgets and what have you. And a few people on the radical end of those talks will talk about this slightly embarrassing thing about the climate change agreement, which is that it depends on taking carbon out of the atmosphere. And it's this thing called BECCS, where they grow food, grow green stuff, and then burn it and stick the stuff under the ground. And they point out that it hasn't actually been tested, and no one knows whether it will work at scale, so it's a little bit risky. But what I'm going to talk about is what's actually happening. So the assumption is this is the Paris Agreement here, and the climate change problem is more or less coincidental with it. But I'll show you in about 2 minutes that isn't really the case, assuming you agree with my 3 basic principles of arithmetic, consistency, and what have you. All right, so this, I've watched about 200 videos on climate change, But after about 10, you sort of get the general gist. It's not good. And I'm a bit autistic, I've got to admit. So I sort of look at, you're hearing a presentation, and I'll come out with something, and you go, that's quite interesting, right? And then you'll just carry on talking about things that aren't that interesting. So you have to sort of use your attention a little bit. Where's my? So here, this is this objectively. I'm going to stick my neck out and say this objectively is the most important graph in the world. I think it's probably the most important graph in the history of humanity. It shows what's happening to the ice. So in 30 years, it's gone from what you might call full cover to 25% of the cover. So the idea is that it's going to hit zero in the next few years. Now, if I was like a 13-year-old science student, I'd be able to work that out, I think. This doesn't take a lot of thinking about, does it? I don't know. I'm really hoping someone's going to prove me wrong, but I'm sort of looking at this. It's like there's a little bit of noise in the system, but ice melts when it's warm, and 25% still to go. And you follow the graphs down, and if you're a very clever mathematician, you can work out where it's going to be 2019, 2020, 2022. But let's say, for the sake of argument, it's going to be ice-free by what, 2024, give or take, which isn't that far off. So, what does that mean? Well, if you see the full graph, you can see the ones in January. It's all over the internet, so presumably from all these ice institutes. If you look at the rest of the ice, is going to be gone within 10 years after that. If you do listen to some of the major professors and supposed intellectuals of the world, and you ask them when the ice is gone, they say like 2030 or 2050. I don't quite know why, or at least that's a deeply psychological issue. I heard a woman last week say it was 2030. Anyway, it's not. It's going to be 2022, isn't it? Because we all can just look at the graph. It's a basic physical system. It's not complicated. Okay, so what? That's interesting. So something leads on from that, which seems to be fairly clear, which is this thing called the latent heat effect, which is just as sort of basic physics as ice melting when it gets over 0 degrees centigrade. And it goes something like this: that once the ice has gone from the ocean, it doesn't reflect the heat back into outer space, and it becomes dark because the water's darker than ice. That seems fairly straightforward. And then it soaks up more heat. So it's like what's called a positive feedback cycle. So I'm interested in the numbers because a lot of the discussions, and if this was a normal climate talk, someone would say, and that's dangerous. Well, I'm interested in how dangerous, let's give us the figures. So you look in the scientific literature, so it's 0.5 of a degree centigrade increase in global temperatures, which is obviously, so the logic is, this is the ice, it's definitely going to melt, and say 99% certain, and that's going to lead to a 0.5 degree increase in global temperature average. So that's interesting. And then something else they sort of tell you in the small print is that the carbon, the CO2 that they put in the atmosphere is a lot of it has yet to come through. So at the moment we're at 1.2. So we know it's going to go up in the next 10 to 20 years by 0.5. That seems like more or less definite. And then there's the CO2 that hasn't actually come through yet. So again, you sort of mention this as a little issue, but it seems like fairly massive, doesn't it? But there's still stuff to come through. So again, what's the figure? Well, the figure is 0.5 apparently. Going back to sort of basic arithmetic, aren't we? I'm just a simple numbers person here. And thousands of scientists around the world are involved in a process that doesn't really seem to accept what we've got, which is we're already above 2 degrees centigrade. That's already locked in. I mean, I could talk about all the other variables, you know, the things that there's a 20% chance that it's going to be 8 degrees higher in the next 5 years. But I don't really need to do that. I'm just trying to show you what is absolutely certain. This is absolutely certain if I understand basic physics and if we agree with basic arithmetic. And then there's this thing called water vapor. So I checked that out again this week. So apparently, like every degree that the world increases in heat, you have to add on another degree because the water, you've got more evaporation, and that goes up into the atmosphere and creates more heat. So in theory, we should be adding on another 1. And then, if you look in the scientific literature, it seems that if we go over 3, then the Amazon's going to burn down. It seems fairly clear. Maybe it's 2.5, maybe it's 3.5, who knows? But it's somewhere in that region. And then that's going to add 1.5. So, okay, so this is before you've actually thought about what humans are doing. So I don't know. I just read this stuff, right? I don't know if it's true. Have you read this stuff? Please prove me wrong, but this is all scientific literature stuff. It's basic physics, right? And then a bit more basic physics is that this is the average temperature increase. But it's also basic physics that the centre of continents warms up twice as fast as the coast. So if we get over 2, that's going to make it 4, right? That's 2 times 2. So at 4 degrees, basically you can't grow grains in the centre of continents. So you can look this up. It's in the literature, like grain, like corn. The productivity of corn decreases by 50% every degree centigrade increase. So if it's 4 degrees, you're looking at 60% reduction in corn production. The whole literature on civilizational stability and sustainability is based upon the notion of storable grains. That's basically how they grew up. But you don't need to be a genius to work out that if grain production falls on average by 50%, obviously there's going to be lots of variability, then we've got a major problem. And we'll be looking at this, in the next 10 to 15 years? So again, look in the scientific literature, and it appears there's been 5 major extinctions in the historical record. One of them was caused by a meteorite, but the rest were caused primarily by CO2 coming out from volcanoes and by methane coming out as well. But the upshot of it is it's actually quite straightforward. So basically, you've got this ball called the planet, and it's got ice at both ice caps. And when it melts, there's this positive feedback. And so when you've got ice knocking around, it's usually about that sort of temperature. And I think we're 13.5. And when there's no ice, it's at 23 or thereabouts. So it sort of makes sense. You have this like flipping, because obviously once all the ice is melted, then the feedback's finished. So you've got like a hot Earth and a cold Earth. So you can see that once this flips, it's not that complicated. You know, it flips into ice and it flips back out of ice. So once it's at 23, in the record, paleo record, it shows that up to 95% of the life on the Earth has died. And the reason they think this is the case is because this thing called nitrate sulfide, I think it's called sulfide.
Nitrate what?
Nitrate sulfide. I think that's right. I can give you some references at the end. So basically what happens is there's no wind because there's no difference in temperature between the equator and the Arctic. And so the oceans become stagnant, a bit like a stagnant pond. And this nitrate sulfide stuff comes out and basically affects the air. And if you're a mammal, you can't breathe properly and you die. And if you're a reptile, you might get away with living. And then it also affects the oxygen because the phytoplankton dies after 6 degrees above what we are at the moment, and that affects oxygen levels. So at the moment it's like 25%, I think, but it can go down to 12 in the historical record. So this is basically like why all higher living mammals die during these great extinctions. So that's what we're heading towards.
Is there any negative feedback loops?
Strangely enough, apparently not. That are only significant. I've just told you about 3 or 4. I've just selected out the ones which are dead certain. There's actually 69 of them in the scientific literature. So we could, for instance, I could talk about methane. Methane is super scary, but it's not certain. They don't know when methane is going to come out of the permafrost. If you're not aware, methane, there's lots of methane in the permafrost. It's trapped because it's icy, and then it melts and the methane comes out. So if 1% of the methane comes out, that's a 0.5 degree increase in global temperatures. So you don't need that much to come out, and it only takes a year for that to happen, by the way. Yeah, it's coming out at rates of knots. Yeah, that's right. Well, that's slightly different. I mean, it was 700 parts per billion. So I've done my homework for this talk. 700 parts per billion in 1800, and it's 1,800 now. So it's gone up exponentially. You can look at the graph. So it would be a reasonable prediction that it's booming up towards the point at which there's going to be a big release of methane. And most of the paleo scientists think this is the reason that triggered the mass extinctions. But I'm being super conservative because no one's actually said, it's not hard physical science, right? It's like a probability analysis thing, which is why I showed you that thing. But the pathway I've shown you is, unless you want to question the arithmetic or question basic physics, that's what's happening. The latent heat effect is done and dusted. The ice melting is done and dusted. The carbon that's yet to come through is done and dusted. Do you see what I mean? So that sticks us into 2 to 3 degrees centigrade. So we've got a number of interesting situations there. Okay, we're going to have a break in a minute, but I don't know if this is going to be helpful, okay? There's a number of different things. So when you're doing, when 1 or 2 of you who are better than me do this talk, you can decide whether this is useful. But when I was a kid, I used to play Monopoly a lot. In fact, I'm a bit of an expert on Monopoly. I played it like every Sunday for 10 years. And I sort of worked out the maths. And it's actually really boring when you've worked out the maths. But something quite interesting about Monopoly, I'm going to do a sort of simple Monopoly thing here. Okay, so everyone's played Monopoly, hopefully. Yeah? So you go around, you buy various properties, yeah, and then once you get set, you can put the houses on, and then you can charge people lots of rent. And what the interesting thing about Monopoly, mathematically, is everyone starts off even, don't they, with £1,500. But mathematically, within 3 hours, you can absolutely guarantee there's only one person left. So why is that? Well, what we sort of know is that I'm doing a simplified Monopoly here. You've got one person with 2 houses here and the opponent with 2 houses there. And you might say it's 50-50 chance for these 2 people to win, right? But then someone lands on this house, let's say that's Mayfair. And if you've ever landed on Mayfair, you know it's not good news. So you lose a house because you've got to pay the rent, right? So you might say, well, you've still got a house left. So to start off with, you've got a 50-50 chance of winning. And I don't know what the odds are, but once you've got only 1 or 2 houses and the other guy's got 3 or 4, it's not looking good, right? I mean, you could more or less scrape back because they could land on you twice. But let's say, for sake of argument, it's 10 to 90, let's say, right? You're just about out of the game if you do the maths. I mean, your ego's probably holding on that you're going to win. And then you land on Mayfair again and you lose your other house. So you've got no houses now. If you're familiar with Monopoly, once you've got no houses, you haven't got any way to get back. So the chances of you winning then are something like this. I don't know whether that's true, right? It could be 1 in 100 million, it could be 1 in 1 million. What we know is you're fucked. You know, you're not going to win because they've got to land on you, about 100 times before you can afford a house, and you've got to not land on them every time you go around, right? So this is like a positive feedback system, which basically predicts that someone will totally win. And the analogy with the climate is, once you've sort of triggered a feedback, then it exponentially increases. Do you see what I mean? Now, what's interesting when I play this with my 6-year-old is when this happens, he can't really cope, and he just like runs out the room in a tantrum. Because psychologically, he thought he was sort of winning, and then he lost half his houses, and then he's sort of wiped out. He's too fast. He emotionally can't really cope. So this is an analogy of our society at the moment. We're sort of like a 50-50, but we're heading towards 10-90, and in 30 years' time, there'll be a mass nervous breakdown because it's going to be game over, right? I mean, I'm just doing the maths, right? It's just like, this is... Another analogy is pushing a ball down the hill, right? If you kick a ball down a hill, there's a certain point at which you can run and catch it, right? But at a certain point, it's going to keep speeding up. It's basic physical law, right? So once you get past about here, it's gone. So we know the Earth system flips, right, between 12.5 and 23. So the thesis is once you've pushed it past 2, a lot of people argue once you've passed it past 1, I mean, we pushed it past 1, but there's 2, 2.5 still in the system, you're up to 3, and then you're speeding up so fast that it's off and away.
Yeah, so I think Dr. Hallam or Roger is making an excellent point, that you come to a certain tipping point within the Monopoly game, and from that point out, it's all downhill for any player left on the board, except for the one who is winning. So you could basically say that the tipping point, whether it is in the Arctic or in Monopoly, the tipping point is when it stops being exciting. It's no longer exciting when it's all going south or all going in one direction, and we'll see in this game if it's possible to figure out, the exact minute when that happens, and when there is no way back for number 2 or number 3 in the game. So you can see that my player is going south, called going south, and the other ones are, as I said, Mr. Cannon, Mr. Battleship, and Miss Wheelbarrow. and Canon is the only one that has built anything. He's got 2 hotels in on the cheapest properties right after go there, and I think you can see that my player has secured all the railroad stations or whatever it is, and the utility companies, electric company and waterworks, and that's a tactic that I often used to use as a kid when I was playing with my family, after dinner or at our cottage in Easter or whatever. We were sort of playing all kinds of board games all the time. I come from a board game family. So what you do when you secure the railroads and the utilities is that you make sure that you have a steady stream of income for the huge part of the game when nobody really has any properties to speak of to build houses and hotels on. So when you're just going round and round and round the board, waiting to get $200 at go, or waiting for the last properties to be sold so that the game can finally begin, that's when you want to have a pretty steady source of income from all of these 4 or 6 points on the board. And so you could say that I've made out the maths of the game like 20, 30 years ago. So that's sort of working for me. So if I don't get those title deeds my own, I'll just try to buy them and see how it goes. And these AIs, these AI players, they are pretty easy to negotiate with. You just add $100 to the price when you ask to make a trade with them, and then you almost always get them, as long as it's not a property with a color that you can build houses on. Okay, so we're coming up on half an hour soon, in 3 minutes, and you can see that Mr. Cannon has still got these 2 hotels, but it's sort of not. It's not taking in so much income. It's like there are only 2 of them, and they are pretty cheap, so it's no big deal, to land on them. And apart from that, you have I don't know who's the closest to get an entire color and or a monopoly, as it's called. I think maybe, I don't know. Yeah, maybe Canon has a chance on the orange streets there on the top left, but I can't really remember the game because it's as I said, I played it in the weekend, and you just have to see what happens, don't we? Yeah, you see, I have like $2,500 because of my tactic there with the railroads and the utilities. So even though I have no houses or hotels, I have more cash than the only one with the hotels. Might change now, perhaps, when Battleship went on the hotel. No, I'm still the richest guy around there. Broadwalk. That's the equivalent of Mayfair in the British Monopoly game. I would really like to have some kind of collector's edition of Monopoly. Let's say a Monopoly computer game where you could easily change the board into all the different countries or all the different national editions of Monopoly. Like in Norway we had Streets in Oslo, and same thing for I guess Copenhagen and Berlin or whatever in Germany. It would be really cool to have all the Monopoly boards in the world in one computer game. So that's a free idea to Parker Brothers or whoever is holding the copyright for Monopoly these days. And it would be an interesting way for kids to learn other languages, I guess, or to learn other capitals. To play it in Dutch or German or French or whatever, and learn a little bit about the main streets in Paris, and maybe pick up some French language while you are trying to read the cards and whatever messages you are getting during the play. So yeah, so apparently I have Going South has bought Boardwalk and is trying to establish his vast empire in New York. Is it New York or is it Washington? I haven't really figured out what city this game is from. I would guess New York, but maybe from an American perspective, maybe Washington is sort of the key city, the main city. I heard that Mr. Trump is he has his residence in Washington anyway, so yeah. Maybe it's just Scandinavians who think about New York as the only important city in America. I don't know. Maybe it's because of immigration history, the Irish and the English and the Swedish and the Danish and the Norwegians. They would go to New York as their point of entry. I don't know. Okay, so apparently I've built the hotel number 3 and 4 in this game, in Boardwalk and Park Lane. So, but I'm not sure this is actually the tipping point of this game, because it could still tip, could still change into another person's favor. So we'll just have to see. That's the free parking. That's another issue for so-called house rules. Everybody who plays Monopoly have their own, understanding of the rules. I never played it this way, because in this computer game, the standard rules say that free parking is only on the free parking spot itself. I mean, what's the point? So we used to play that if you landed on free parking, the next time you roll the dice, you wouldn't have to pay for whatever you landed on, Maybe apart from jail, I don't know. But I think even jail was free parking, because if you landed on free parking, the next, I think even if you had like a pair or two dice showing the same number, you could go like for 2 or 3 turns after free parking without paying anything, because that's mine and our interpretation, and there are other official rules and house rules, like landing on go. You would get twice the amount of money as for just passing it, and I think what happens if you land on a property that doesn't belong to anyone, then we would just, if you didn't want to buy it, you would just go on and wait for somebody to land on it who wanted to buy it. But in this computer game, it's obviously sent to auction, so they auction off the property if the one who lands on it the first time doesn't want to buy it, then it's auctioned, and of course that's a good thing for the game to proceed faster. But again, it's not the way we used to play anyway. So, and an interesting thing about the trading, when you're dealing and wheeling and trading, suggesting trade with other players. I remember from the thousands of times I played Monopoly that sometimes, like my sisters or whatever, they would just they would never trade with me, because if I wanted to buy something, that was the exact thing they didn't want to sell to me. And they were probably right, because yes, it's like you're not buying a property in this game in order to spread peace and flowers. Obviously, you're buying it to dominate and eliminate everybody else. So I think that's a good instinct. But of course, here you have artificial intelligence, and they are sometimes programmed with different personalities, and you can also choose the level of how intelligent they are, and they may also go into a very stubborn attitude and say that no, I'm not selling anything, not unless you have something to offer to me apart from money. So I think it's in the history of our civilization, I think it's a good thing to have developed artificial intelligence on the board game level, like chess and Go and Monopoly and other games, because I think in every family there is one or more persons who like playing, like let's say Reversi or Othello or Monopoly or chess. There are some person in that family who likes to play that game more than the other people in the family likes to play it. It's almost bound to be like that. Some people are more nerdy than others, and I think it's a fantastic thing that you can actually twist or work your brain against computer opponents, even though you don't have anyone who fancies playing that exact game at that exact time when you want to play it. So yeah, I think that's one of the few good things about civilization and our advanced stage within that. So what's going on now? I think this is me buying something from Miss Wheelbarrow, the only female artificial intelligence. I can't say. Oh, okay. Not sure what that was. Okay, I think I think I sold one of my red color properties to Miss Wheelbarrow to get out of some money trouble with the Canon, Mr. Cannon. So that might have been a tipping point if I wasn't able to pay up, because yeah, at the moment you have to start selling your houses for half the price you bought them for. That's sort of when you are going south, and that's what you don't want to do in Monopoly, because you're losing half your investment. So still 4 players. Nobody died yet. But I think I also haven't earned $1 on my 2 hotels yet. So let's see. This may be the make or break moment round. Okay. Mr. Battleship has to pay twice the amount for the railroad visit. That's a good thing. I think normally when you play this game you don't really notice when these tipping points or feedbacks set in, because you're so, or at least the most eager players at least, are so into their ego, into their competitive nature. So they really, maybe this is the tipping point. The other hotel owner landing on my boardwalk. But Mr. Cannon was actually able to pay me, just out of hand. So, but, this is a candidate, minute 41. No, I was saying that, your ego and your competitive mind just, goes on and on until until you either win or lose. So you don't really, if you're one of those eager players, you don't really notice much else than, your little heap of dollar bills, Monopoly money. I also remember that I used to think of Monopoly money as less real than the other money that my parents had in their wallets and stuff. That was before I grew up myself and found out that the so-called real money is also just money printed out of thin air by the banks. There's no real value behind it. So if you are in a crisis like 2008 in London and New York, you can just basically just print more money to sort of solve the crisis, and everybody's happy. Everyone's got more dollar bills between their hands, and it's like in some ways Monopoly is more real than the so-called real world, I guess. So I'm trying to buy the green streets or the green properties, because I'm a green guy, so yeah, again, guess maybe, we had a visit to my hotel on Boardwalk in minute 41, and now Mr. Battleship refused to sell me the other green properties. I can't really recall what's the story there. We'll see. Yeah, maybe Battleship needs to be weakened a bit by paying for the other hotels around there. Aha, so Miss Wheelbarrow went bankrupt all of a sudden. The second person landing on one of the hotels. That's minute 44. Okay. So it's it's getting very close to a tipping point if it hasn't already happened. So let's look at this trade now. Going South has $3,500, the most anyone's ever had. And got a decline for the proposition. That's easy in this game, is just to amp up the amount. I think actually this trade, if it goes good, I think maybe this trade, with everything that's happened already, is a tipping point, because the decision to sell me these green properties, maybe not the smartest decision from my opponent, Mr. Battleship, but it's definitely good for my prospects in this very harsh capitalistic game of Monopoly. Oh, I remember one of the most epic games of Monopoly I played in the real world, with my mother-in-law to be, or never to be, whatever you want to call it. And she was like, she started. We were like 4 people playing, I think, outside their cabin, the cottage, on a summer day, and we started off like 4 or 5 players, and she was like, no, you can't buy anything, no properties for me, no. She was really, really harsh and dismissive for any suggestion from me for a trade. And then of course the other players faded out of the game, and I sat back with only my mother-in-law to be and myself, and I returned the favor, returned the harshness, and and sort of, turn for turn, just grounded her down into the dirt, and won the game and earned a new enemy for life, and I never married her daughter. Oh my god. All the memories, all the good memories. Okay, so now I see the green properties have got like 8 houses between them, and this is sort of the end for the exciting part of the game, because the tipping point has already been, and everybody not named going south, it's going south. So that's like, if you want to compare to the Arctic and the climate system, it's like, this is like, maybe 1985 or 1980 or 1990. It's hard to say exactly when the tipping point was reached, when there was no way back for the Arctic climate and the Arctic sea ice. But when you already passed the tipping point, like in this game of Monopoly, when the tipping point is already passed, everybody can see it. It's like, if somebody walked into this room and saw this board on the table, they would say, okay, so going south is gonna win, obviously. But it's like somewhere between minute 41 and minute 44 of this game, I think, when some people finally land on the most expensive hotels in the entire Washington. and in particular, or the last stage is like when Mr. Battleship chooses to sell me the two other green properties. It's called Pennsylvania something and North Carolina something. I can't really read it. Avenue or something. Then it's more or less a done deal, you know, and it's all downhill from there. So, okay, so Battleship is the only one left. So good luck to Battleship. Battleship has some properties, but no complete series, so you can't build houses anywhere, and the only one he can trade with is the only other opponent, which is going south, and of course going south is not gonna be Mr. Nice Guy in this competition. So, but it's also not, you know, he's not the worst guy in the world, because like he could build houses and hotels on the yellow properties, but it's like you know, he's not Jesus Christ, but he's got some conscience, and I'm sure if there was an opportunity, he would donate money to all kinds of charities and stuff, which is like the big thing in America, you know, to fuck everybody over and then donate a little bit of money at Christmas or whatever. You know? It's capitalism with a twist, with an asterisk. So this is the other thing about Monopoly. Stay in jail. If you're lucky enough to be put in jail, stay there for as long as you possibly can, because you know it's the cheapest place to be in this gruesome capitalist game. So did I mention that I spent 5 days in jail for a climate change direct action? That was like in my formative young years when I was at the university. So I had been a member of this eco-activist group, and we chose to sabotage the enlargement of one of the motorways in Norway, the E6. That we did that when I was 19, and then I managed to dodge the police or whatever, the person who serves you, you know, the fine. I managed to dodge those guys for 5 years until I was served, you know, with the final judgment or whatever, and then I had to go to jail for 5 days. It was originally a fine of 2,000 kroner to pay to the government for losing against the builders who wanted to construct the motorway. But the principle we had in those days was that we were in the right. Our eco campaign was in the right, so we didn't pay anyone, you know, for what we did, because you know it should be the other way around. They should pay us because we were, you know, trying to save the world. And I think the tipping point had already been, you know, even back then when I was 19. But you know, you have to just you have to. You have to be an activist when you're young, otherwise you just, you know, go south, basically. So after 5 years of dodging this thing, I had to go to this, you know, very low sentence prison in eastern Norway, and I spent only 5 days, but oh my god, here's Extinction Rebellion. This is exciting. Maybe they can make some changes to this very gruesome, cynical capitalist game. Let's see how this goes. Maybe they can make some societal changes around here. Oh no, they're already gone. Ah, okay, but it was exciting as long as it lasted. So anyway, I was able to take those 5 days in prison for my climate change action, blocking a digger, before university started over in January. So I was able to go in there, spend 5 days there, and then start university like all the other students. So that was a good thing. Very interesting experience to go to jail for something you really believe in. Oh no! Battleship landed on Park Lane. Oh my god, there's a hotel. Oh. Oh no. So it seems Going South has won the game. And you know, who would have thunk, eh? So this is after the tipping point at about 43 minutes into the game. You know, it's all going south, and that's the way it's going to go in the Arctic, and with the climate catastrophe, and civilization will basically collapse, and I don't think there's any way back, whatever anyone does, but it's I think it's exciting and colorful, of course, with the Extinction Rebellion and the young people rebelling against something their parents or grandparents would really have had to have stopped back in the day. Okay, bye.